Hello and welcome to this video. In last video we discussed up to the reign of terror, and in this video we will discuss about the seizing of power in France by the middle class people and the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. 1795, middle classes seizes the power of France. After the fall of the Jacobin government, that is in 1794, when the leader of the Jacobin club, that is Maximilian Robespierre, was sentenced to death, then the Jacobin government fell, and finally, after its fall, the wealthier middle class of France seized the power. Now they took the control of ruling France. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to non-propertized section of society. As we already discussed in previous video that during the reign of Jacobin club, that is the reign of Maximilian Robespierre, as maximum members of the deprived group, the non-wealthy or non-propertized section were forming club in order to fight for their political and other rights. After they came into government, declared that during their rule all the men of 21 and above year can vote without respect to their wealth. But after the fall of Jacobin government and the seizing of power by the middle class or the wealthier section of the third state people, that is the middle class people, they again modify the rule and they made it constitutional that non-propertized section of the society could not vote. It provided for two elected legislative councils. This then appointed a directory, an executive made up of 5 members. Then there were formation of legislative council, which was elected form of government. At the same time, they also formed a elect. At the same time, they also formed a directory, which composed of 5 different members, so that the power would not remain concentrated to one hand and it must be split among persons so that no single person can misutilize that power. As you already know that the Jacobin government was also elected form of government, but the whole power, the whole control was in the hand of Maximilian Robespierre, due to which he started misutilizing his power. He even punished the member of his own political party who were not agreed to his ideas. In order to avoid such condition, what they learned from the past, they decided this time that power would not remain concentrated in any one's hand, rather it must be split among different individuals. And for that they appointed a directory along with the elected legislative council. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one man executive as under the Jacobins, as we already discussed. The directors often clashed with the legislative council, who then sought to dismiss them. The move was obviously good, as their intention was not to let the power concentrated in one's hand. But what happened when the power was divided between the elected legislative and the appointed directory? Then what happened that there was a frequent clash between their ideas. When the directory wants something, the legislative council did not. When legislative council wants something, the directory did not. In that way they often used to clash, and because of that now the elected legislative wants the directory to dismiss. And in such tug and fro situation the government lasted for around 4 years, and finally in 1799 the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte happened. What happened that the political instability of the directory paved the way for the rise of military dictator Napoleon Bonaparte. And as there was a constant rivalry, the constant clash between the legislative council which was elected and the appointed directory, this political unstable situation paved the way. It smoothed the way for rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a military dictator. Dictator means again the opposite of republic, or the contrast of republic, where people had no power to choose their ruler, rather they have to accept whatever he imposes. So dictator is a ruling situation where the whole power remain concentrated in one's hand, like monarchy. So again France experienced the dictatorial rule. The revolution ends with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. And what France people struggled so hard, seeking for equality, seeking for justice, seeking for rights, everything, the whole spirit of the revolution came to an end with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, as Napoleon Bonaparte was again a dictator. Well, if you try to look from the starting, the ruling of Louis XVI, then France becoming constitutional monarchy, then the complete uprooting of monarchy, and then France turning into a constitutional France, and then and the reign of terror, and then again fall of the Jacobin government, rise of the middle class to seize the power of ruling France, again rising of Napoleon Bonaparte in this tough political up and down situation of France, where France people experience a complete opposite kind of government as rising and falling and rising and falling and rising and falling. But in this constant change in political stability, what remained constant was the ideas of freedom, the ideas of equality before laws, and the fraternity. This thing remained inspiring not only for the French people but also for the whole world. Although France experienced so many changes in the form of government and so much political instability, but the ideas behind those revolutions, that is idea of fraternity, equality, struggle for freedom, all those ideas remain constant and keep inspiring the people of France, and also inspire the whole or the rest world. Now let's discuss about the Napoleon Bonaparte in detail. Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of France. In 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself, he declared himself as the Emperor of France. He set out to conquer neighboring European countries, disposing dynasties and creating kingdoms where he placed members of his family. After he declaring himself as the Emperor of France, he now set out to conquer the whole world, and starting from his neighboring countries. So he decided to declare war against his neighboring countries, and then disposing the kings who were king by their dynastical inheritance, and he decided to place his own family members as the ruler of those conquered areas. He saw his role as a modernizer of Europe, and he considered himself as the modernizer of France. He thought that he is the person who could bring modernization to France, or who could transform France and who could modernize France. So he saw himself as the modernizer of France. He introduced many reforms in order to modernize France, which had long lasting effect on Europeans. He introduced many new things in order to modernize France. Some of them were very positive, which had a very long lasting effect on Europe, like protection of private property, uniform system of weights and measures, that is by introducing decimal system. But except those things, he also did many inappropriate decision like restoring slavery system and all, about which we will discuss on later. Finally, in 1815, he was defeated in the War of Waterloo. He became the ruler of France in 1804, and finally in 1815, after a rule of almost 11 years, he was defeated in the War of Waterloo. Many of his measures that carried the revolutionary ideas of liberty and modern laws to other parts of Europe had an impact on people long after Napoleon had left. Even after his death, many of his measures that were taken in order to carry the idea of revolution, liberty, which were taken to other parts of Europe, remain inspiring and had a great impact on people's conscious mind and lasted long even after his death. That's all about this video. Thank you.